Throughout history, there have been reports of strange and mysterious creatures lurking in the darkest corners of our world. They are known by many names: Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yahweh, ominous. What are they? How have they remained such a mystery for so long? Join us on Night Callers Radio as we search for the answers to one of the world's greatest mysteries.
Welcome everybody to Night Callers Radio. I'm here with Laurie and Oh, I can tell what kind of night it's going to be. I'm here with Luke and Lauren, and Brian is not going to be here tonight. And we've got a great show for all of you tonight. Our guest is R. Scott Nelson, and he is a linguist, now known as a crypto-linguist, and he is our guest tonight. How's everybody doing tonight? Luke?
I'm
Lauren,
doing
how
great.
y'all doing? Good. Well, I hope y'all are doing better than me.
It'll be okay.
Drinking tea. Okay. Just in case we run out of time, because tonight is going to be a very exciting show and a very interesting show, and I just want everyone to know that next week we're having Larry Batson on. He is the one that did the presentation before the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Commission and also the Department of Interior. So he will be on our show next week. So everyone be sure to tune in next week. And I'm not going to waste another minute because I would like to go ahead and bring on our guest, Mr. Nelson. I don't know if he wants to be called Scott or Mr. Nelson.
Scott is fine.
Scott is fine. Okay. Hi, how are you? I want to tell everyone a little bit about Scott. He's retired from the U.S. Navy, and he's had 30 years' experience in foreign languages and linguistics. He has logged thousands of hours in voice transcription, and he basically took to task studying the Barry Moorhead tapes recorded in the Sierras. And from that, he has documented his study and wrote it down, and it's called the Characteristics of Human Language Evident in the Barry Moorhead Tapes. And it is a fascinating read. Someone can put that URL up. But I'm going to go ahead and step over here and say, hello, Scott, how are you doing tonight?
Very well, Laura.
Well, you gave a presentation at the Yakima Roundup, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And was it basically over the characteristics of human language evident in the Barry Moorhead tape?
Mm-hmm. Well, that paper that you have there that's a pretty small section that we released just to get a little bit of the word out of what we're doing. The whole study is comprised of a couple hundred of pages, and we have 70 pages, over 75 pages just in the transcripts alone.
Wow!
So yeah, my presentation at the Yakima Roundup was based on the entire study.
Oh my goodness! Well, I'm glad that wasn't out there because I'm going to be honest. I don't think I could have got through all of that. It was very interesting. It was very interesting. Now, some of it we had to. You might have to talk in layman's terms for us.
Sure.
Some of the words are a little bit. Well, we don't know what they are. We had to look them up. Some of them.
Sure.
But what? Well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I do have a question.
Sure.
How were you approached with the Barry Moorhead tapes? Did they approach you with it, or did you just take it upon yourself to study?
No. This happened very accidentally. First off, I need to say that I am not and have never been a Bigfoot researcher.
Oh, right.
I'm a retired Navy cryptolinguist, and that was my job in the Navy for just about 20 years. And since I retired from the Navy, I've been teaching at a small college in the Kansas City area, and have never really had other than a passive interest in Bigfoot, and that was only because I grew up in the Rocky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I grew up with the stories, and in fact, I grew up in a town right next to the biggest Indian school in west of the Mississippi, and so a lot of my Indian friends, as a youth, would talk about the wild man up on the mountain, and so, but other than that, I'd spent years up in the mountains hunting and camping, and had never seen or heard any sign of any such thing, or didn't recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had anything more than a passive interest in it. And then one day,
I can understand that because I was the same way.
Sure.
I never even watched the movies, but go ahead.
Well, my son, my 12-year-old son, was we were in my classroom one afternoon in February of last year. That would be 2008, and he needed a report for school. And of course, he's like all 12-year-old boys, he's interested in Bigfoot and UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and you name it. So he decided he wanted to look up UFOs. So we started to Google it, and in that process, he said, "Dad, what do you think Bigfoots sound like?" And of course, I remembered, a couple of the movies from the 70s, so I let out this wailing moan, and Stevie looked at me funny and said, "That's not what Bigfoots sound like, Dad." So I said, well, let's see. And so we got on. We just started Googling it, and that's when we stumbled upon the Sierra sounds, what we now are calling the Barry Moorhead tapes. And what you can find on the internet are just small little samplings of the original tapes. But I played that original tape and a couple of the original samplings right there with Stevie there, and then I went back and I played it over and I played it over and over, and finally Stevie kind of smacked me and says, "Dad, what's the matter?" Because immediately what I recognized in these samplings is that whatever these creatures are, they were using language. And that's the first thing I turned and said to my son. I said, "Stephen, this is a language."
Wow.
And
it wasn't just a communication like other animals do. You felt more like it was a language.
Oh, I knew it was.
Like oh, wow.
I knew it was. There's no mistake about it.
Okay. Now, can you tell us briefly, or
sure,
not so briefly, however you wish, why you do believe it's a language?
Well, I know it's a language because I have isolated too many elements of language within the vocalizations for it not to be language.
Oh, I see.
But to answer your first question, to finish answering your first question, and
okay,
essentially
I'm sorry.
what happened was, we walked out to the, we walked out to the car that day, and of course my mind was going every which way.
I bet it was.
I had so many new questions in my mind because I could tell immediately they were not human, yet they were speaking a language. And so we're walking out the car, and Stevie says, "Dad, how did you know it was a language? It just sounded like apes fighting to me."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, to be sure, son, we would have to slow it down and analyze the tapes like Dad used to do in the Navy." And I told him right there, I says, "We've got to get our hands on those tapes." So I went on a campaign. I almost became obsessed with it. Went on a campaign to get a hold of those tapes, and started sending out letters and emails to everybody I could find. And I started buying every book and checking every book out of the library that I could find. And because in my mind I thought someone else had to have known that these creatures speak a language, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I started writing these emails out, and professing a lifelong dedication to the pursuit of Bigfoot, which was not true, but I did. But I did that so that I could get my hands on these tapes, and sure enough, it worked, because finally I got a call from a researcher who knew where I could find Ron Moorhead.
Okay, wow.
So a little bit of detective work. I got a hold of Ron Moorhead, and after a few minutes of convincing him that I was not a crackpot,
which we have a lot of those in this field.
Oh yeah,
so,
sure.
Yeah.
But he had really one word for me, and he said you might be the guy we've been looking for 35 years.
Yes.
And I mean, the next day the tapes were on their way to me.
Oh my goodness!
And since then, I've had the original tapes, and have been analyzing the original tapes for over, it's been about 15 months now.
Wow!
And we're just coming close to the end of the analysis, and where we're ready to publish, and it's going to be pretty big work.
Oh, there are a lot of great works coming out. It's like things are cracking open finally. Finally.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of them. Well, this is paramount. Because I have heard of a lot of people say they have a language. And I'm thinking, well, of course they have a language. Communicate back and forth. I mean, we've heard it, we've recorded it, but it's much more. What is the right word I'm trying to think of? It's much more. It's more complicated.
It's very different than our language, but
yes.
Yeah.
It's not just simple grunts and huffs and.
Oh no.
Gargling noises, and it's not just utterances.
And that's another thing that struck me in the beginning of all of this, is that at the same time as I was reading all of these books, which I was devouring, by the day, and with no mention of language whatsoever in any of the scientific studies of it, yet I was reading individual witness report after report after report, saying that it
well, you are
like,
turning into a Bigfoot researcher.
Oh, well,
do you know that's what you're doing?
Yeah, it has changed a lot. It has changed, hell, the life of me and my kids, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
But I was seeing so many eyewitness reports as saying they were speaking to each other in a language, or they were mumbling, or they were chattering, and they had all these references to these linguistic words. Yet the scientific researchers had never, and I thought at that time, maybe that it was a taboo subject. And
it was. It was. It was, but it's fast becoming not so taboo.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many taboo subjects 10 years ago that now people, more and more people that have a credible presence are coming forward, like you and others like you, are coming forward, and they're stating what they are finding. And they're validating a lot of what these witnesses are saying.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about time. That's, it is about time. It's a time of revelation of truth in this field, because we've been far too long been prejudiced about what comes out. even in our report taking, we don't add this or we don't add that because it's just not. It makes the witness look like they're a little wacko or something like that, but probably actually happened to them. They probably actually heard what they thought was the language. I've been out in the field and heard what I thought was the language. I've recorded what I thought was the language. And there's a lot of people out there that have. And so to get someone that is educated in this field to come forward and say, it is a language, is just, thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Luke, do you have anything you want to ask us, Scott?
Well, you asked another question. I don't think I addressed it very well. You asked what were those things in the vocalizations that told me right off that it was a language?
Yes. What clued you in? I mean, what was
it? Immediately, what I recognized were that there was more than one creature, and that they were speaking in what we call conversational turns of utterance. In other words, they were talking back and forth to each other. They were using articulated phonemes, combined into what we call morphemes, or individual units of meaning that were being repeated, both in a query inflection, or like they're asking a question, and then it's the same morpheme. We would find it in the answer or the response back to that query.
Okay.
That was the first thing.
Okay.
That was the first thing.
Now.
And then it's more than anything else. The thing that told me that it was a language is that it simply sounded like a language.
Right. Right.
Now that's for linguists who spend so much time under what we call the cans or the headphones, in the military, right? Sitting there for 12 hours on a watch, listening to the human voice on tape. You get a feel for this. So, for me to come out immediately and say I recognize it as language is not so much a scientific statement as a linguistic sensitivity developed over years of listening to the human voice on tape. Okay, in the excerpt, it said something to this effect. It said, in the end, we must be careful not to assign the language of Bigfoot or his thought patterns to any one humanly contrived pigeonhole, while at the same time analyzing his language by the human definition of it. Okay, I have to ask you about the thought patterns. Okay. Yeah, there was another part in there, and I can't locate it right now, but there was a thought that the thought patterns are faster than ours. Well, we don't know. There are a couple of possibilities, okay, because one of the distinct characteristics that separates this language from human language is that they speak it much faster. In other words, in fact, I don't think I would have recognized this as anything other than apes fighting if I had not spent so many hours listening to the human voice speeded up and slowed down and listening to languages in that way. Because that's what we do in cryptolinguistics. Right? Yes. We alter the prosody or the speed of deliverance to we slow it down, we speed it up, to try to recover the phonemes off of taped voice recordings. And you know what's amazing is we actually do the same thing when we get a recording ourselves. We run it through a sound program, and we slow it down, we speed it up, we play it backwards, everything under the sun to try to figure out what it is. And we do have a question in the chat, if you don't mind if I go ahead and relay this question. Sure. The question is, how do we know that these are Bigfoot sounds if no one has ever seen them open their mouth and speak like this? Now, that is something that I cannot definitively say. I have never. Now, I have been out in the field because I've been at this for about almost a year and a half, and I have utilized the vocalizations that I've gotten off of these tapes, and I have gotten response out there. No language, no. I mean, I haven't had Bigfoot come up and decide to have tea with me.
I wish I could say that too. No.
But I've had grunts, and I've had fake coyote calls and fake turkey calls and things that were obviously in response to my vocalizations.
Right. Right.
Now, rephrase that question to me again. So the question was, how do we know that these are Bigfoot sounds? Right.
If no one has ever seen them open their mouth and speak like this.
Now, there have been some reports where people have been very close when they walked by, for instance, and didn't actually see the mouths open up, but the creatures walked by at such a close proximity that the sound could not have been coming from anything else. It wasn't human vocalizations, besides the fact that they were, gigantic and smelled bad. For me, in what I'm doing, I cannot definitively come out and say, and I won't be coming out definitively and saying that these vocalizations that we are studying come from a Bigfoot creature.
Right.
I can't say that scientifically.
But what do they come from then?
Well, all I can say, right. What are the other options? Aliens from outer space? That's the only other option, because
when you have all the other indicators there, especially on some of my recordings, I cannot definitively say that I believe they are Bigfoot. But at the particular time, all these other indicators were going on. So I'm assuming, I guess, that it probably could be. And sending them off, I've sent many a recording off to Corpus Christi, to the Center of Bioacoustics, and had them examined, and they would come back and say, we cannot identify this sound.
Sure.
So if it was local wildlife, possibly it would be identified, hopefully. Like if it was a dog or a mountain lion or a panther or wolf or whatever other form of wildlife does run around in this area, but it didn't come back as such. So what does that leave? Aliens from outer space.
Well,
the only thing left.
Right. Let me put it this way. As far as what our work with these particular tapes are, and these, I've had dozens of tapes sent in to me since I've begun this, since I began speaking on these radio programs, right? And nothing quite comes anywhere near really the quality of the Barry Moorhead tapes and the sheer volume of it to be analyzed, right? I can get 3 seconds here or 9 seconds there, and that's about it that people have sent me in, and there's not much you can do with it. But with these tapes, what I was able to do, and it happened again almost immediately, and the rest of this whole study has been documenting what I recognized immediately, was 3 things. The first one is that the creatures that are on these tapes are not human.
Right.
In the way that we currently define modern humans.
And you can also say that it is not wild monkeys escaped from the surface.
Right. You can say that they're not monkeys. There were not wild monkeys loose up in the Sierra Nevadas in 1974.
Okay.
We can probably pretty much accept that fact. The second thing was, first, they're not human. Second thing, they are speaking a language. And the third thing was, and that we can show, and that I would defy anyone who gets their hands on these tapes to prove me wrong, is that these tapes were not and could not have been faked. Those are the three definitive statements that I will say now, and that we will be saying when we come out with our book.
Wow. Okay, when is the book going to come out?
Well, we are beginning to write the last chapter. We are planning on a final expedition.
Okay.
To try out some things that we have put into practice. Ron Moorhead and myself are going to go back up. So it's going to be, not in the exact location, because that location has been kept secret and it's almost like a blood pact with those cowboys or hunters, if you will, from the very beginning. And so, but we're going up into the same area where Ron has taken his daughter several recent years, and has had a lot of activity going on around them. He's going to
that should make for a great last chapter.
It's just going to be him and I, and essentially it's going to be, the Sierra Sounds 35 years later. So we're going to do that in the end of July, and that should be pretty much, we should be wrapping things up around that time.
Wow.
And we have a lot of, expectation as to what we might turn up on that.
Exactly. I can't. Wow. Well, okay. Luke, do you have any questions to interject right at this moment, or are you just reserving? Are you still with us, Luke?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I do have some questions, as a matter of fact.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, Scott, you was talking about them not being human vocalizations.
Yes.
Would your reasoning behind that thought be because the subject vocalizing in the recordings don't have the vocal range as a human?
Yes, that was shown probably about 15 years ago by a Dr. Curlin, who analyzed these tapes.
Mm-hmm.
He was not a linguist or anything like that. He was a sound specialist, right? So he had analyzed these tapes for sounds, within the human range, and they both, many, actually, I should say, an abundance of the vocalizations go both below and above the human range of the voice.
Right. And I noticed this is kind of skipping back and forth, but there's one subject that you touched on was that also that them leaving, maybe breaking branches, or the people calling certain tree breaks territorial markers. You're saying this could be also be a form of an unspoken language? Is that possible?
Who knows? It could be what I think the point I was making in that little passage that I wrote was we cannot assume that these are only territorial markers.
Right.
The same way that they could be very elaborate form of graphic communication.
Mm-hmm. And well, the reason I was glad that you had said that, because I've kind of done an in-depth study on some of the structures that I found, the smaller TP structures that I found in the forest. And what I have found is that some of the branches that these structures consist of are actually food source trees. Walnut,
really?
Yes, walnut, pecan, red mulberry trees, wild plum, and sometimes you'll find these vines intertwined at the top. It might be grapevines or dewberry vines. So in
other words, it's sort of a menu.
Yeah, do they have the intelligence level to determine which tree is what, which I think they do. So I found that pretty interesting.
I would have to say easily.
Yeah. And we know that the bonobo chimpanzees, they leave signs along trails for other chimpanzees to follow. So I thought that only made sense that a Bigfoot could do that also. But it's very interesting, and there's so many different areas that you could cover. Also, about as far as, do you think that this language could be just located in one single area, one geographic area? Or do you think it is widespread?
Well, this specific language, I don't know, because I can tell you this much. The Berry tapes were recorded in 1972, and the Moorhead tapes were in 1974. And the difference in the two languages, well, my point is that there actually was a difference between the two languages that were recorded in exactly the same place.
Wow.
Enough that where we could almost say that they were tribal dialects.
Wow.
If you will.
Wow.
Now, here's a question.
Now that would take a lot. That would take a lot of study to corroborate.
Sure.
And a lot of further recordings, in a big database, things like this, to really say definitively. But to a linguist like myself, we're trained to hear nuances of language,
right,
like this.
Wow. And as far as have you listened to the Dave Donlin recording that was made in Ohio in 2007?
I'm not sure. I've listened to several dozen of things that have been sent to me, and I wish I could, keep track of every single person that did send me something and remember them. But
this one was found on the Bigfoot Sound page. It's at where the Sierra Sounds are at. It's a newer addition to their sound group that's there. I wasn't sure if you were.
You mean it was made up in the same area?
No, it was made in Ohio. The recording was made in Ohio. And that's what brought me to the question of geographic location.
Oh, yeah.
Because
we have to assume that if this is a creature, and I'm just going to make that assumption, if that wherever Bigfoot has spread his, his species, that they would take language with them, the same as humans did. In other words, there was never really a time, linguists don't believe there was ever really a time where a certain group of humans had language and another group of humans didn't.
Absolutely.
Or that one had a more elaborate and complex form of the language than the other, humans didn't have that. The syntax and the grammatical categories could be different from each other, but still the complexity is always there.
Right.
And there never really was a time in the development of human language, at least, where we think that primal man had a vocabulary of maybe 200 important words, and the rest was grunts and groans and banging on sticks,
right,
or physical gestures. That's an old, outdated understanding of how language developed. Now we really believe that language develops almost spontaneously as a full-blown complex system, wherein when ancient man decided to name this object tree, he also decided to name every single other object in his environment, and there really was none of this grunting and groaning and gesturing. So I would have to say that any other creature that evolved parallel to ourselves, developed the same, their communication techniques the same way that we did.
Right. That's
So
very.
it has to be everywhere. I say it has to be everywhere.
Yeah, because
now that might be different. The dialect or the entire language could be different up in Ohio than out in California.
Right.
Just as the American Indian languages were. And that would make a lot of sense.
I was going to say that as well.
It's language changes with isolation. Language changes. It's a living entity.
Yeah.
Yes.
It evolves and changes.
That's fascinating. The whole, as far as I've heard things when I've been in the field. I've listened and I've heard whistles before, and of course the wood knocks and so on and so forth. But these whistles that I've heard, they are up and down tones. They're not birds. They're the animals. And most researchers will go into an area and they'll find what animals are indigenous to that area that they're researching, and they'll learn their vocalizations to be sure that if they do catch something, now it's not saying that an animal that's known will make will make a sound that's different than has ever been heard before, but people try to familiarize themselves with the indigenous wildlife. But in this case, I've never heard anything like these whistles before. They were not a set pattern of whistles. They were up and down tones, and probably 50 yards from us in the tree line. And, you just sit back and you listen to these whistles and you go, oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Listen to this. And you get this huge smile on your face, and you're saying, I'm hearing something that, nobody else has probably ever heard before, or very few have. and you get excited. You really do get excited.
Oh, sure.
And,
I have experienced a little bit of that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact. Yeah, oh, yes. And when it comes in direct response to my attempts to mimic the vocalizations on these tapes, that's just, it's undeniable.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is what happened to me. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but I was very much a skeptic. You can ask Lori or anybody that knows me. I was very much a skeptic.
About the owl thing, right?
Yes, about the owl calls. As far as them mimicking owls. And I was very much a skeptic, and I had something happen to me one night, and there was 11 people there when this took place. And we'd heard this call come out of the woods, and nobody knew what it was. It was a howl of some sort. It wasn't a canine call or anything like that. Right. And I said, okay, I want to find out what this is. I said, I'm going to go try one of these barred owl calls and see if I get a response. Well, I walk up to the tree line, and I blurt out the loudest barred owl call I could possibly do, and I got a response. And this was a very lousy barred owl imitation. And what soon followed after that led me to believe that what had made that lousy barred owl call was not human and not any other animal but a Bigfoot. But the whole story, it goes on. We had rocks thrown at us and roars and everything else. So, but it's, as far as them imitating sounds, do you feel that they can imitate sounds and mimic?
I've heard them do, like you say, I've heard them do very poor sounds. Now, I understand that they can also imitate them almost perfectly. But we were out here on a Kansas farm that has been experiencing phenomenon for years and years. And I was put in touch with this farmer out here by a researcher, and I just started going out there and doing some field work with these vocalizations. And we've heard a very, very deep guttural grunt that reverberated through the forest like it could not have been anything other than a Bigfoot. I really believe that. And we heard a coyote that had such a whiskey soured voice.
Yep.
It couldn't have been a coyote. And we got back, me and the farmer and Stevie, as a matter of fact, were the ones that were out on this farm. We got back, and the farmer's two boys who were in the backyard that had heard that said, "Dad, that was not a coyote." And the dads and me and the farmer both looked at his boy and said, "We know." And we were out on that same farm again in response to vocalizations from the tapes, and me and another partner I was out there with heard a very poor imitation of a gobbler turkey. And I almost got the feeling that I walked away.
This was that night, right? This was that night.
This was that right at dusk.
Turkey.
No, right at dusk. Yeah, this was right at dusk. Both these times, all of these times, and but I got a distinct feeling later. Like you guys who've experienced these yourselves, you guys know that sometimes it takes a day or two just to fully realize what had happened. But later, it's when you start rethinking, through everything.
Well, you're putting it all together. When you go to putting it all together, okay.
But I started thinking that it was almost as if the creatures were giving me just enough to satisfy me.
Probably.
So that I would go away.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, it was almost like, you know what, this human is going to keep trying to speak my language until I give him some little thing, and then he'll go away and shut up because he sounds stupid trying to speak my language anyway. So, and that's the feeling I walked away with.
Well, you know, and they feel that way. You know, I've experienced that where I felt totally dumb out there trying to communicate with them, and you just got the feeling that, you know, you were just putting the whole human race to shame. Yeah. You know, and to just give up and go home. You know, but
Ron and I have come up with a theory that we're pretty sure about, and that is that you cannot trick them. And
no,
they know.
I truly believe that.
And that they know when you're trying to trick them. And it's, so our the way we're going to approach them when we go out this last time is we're going to go out there and try to be as forthright and honest as we can.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you can do.
That's right, yeah. And
because you know what you're saying is because they watch you. They have from the day they're young until they're very old. They watch us. Mm. They know our body language. They know, and nothing. They don't miss anything. They don't miss anything. Once they have come upon you and are watching you, everything you do is suspect.
Uh-huh.
And that's why I think the best way is, like you say, just go straight forward and say, I'm here to talk to you. Hello. Uh-huh. Pull up a chair, sit down, whatever. Uh-huh. I mean, it's worth a try.
Well, and it's true. I mean, animals in general, wildlife can read, you know, another animal. They can definitely read humans' body language because if you go out into the forest and once you say you're a hunter, and you become the predator, you act like a predator, and they can see this and they know what a predator is. But if you go into the woods, and I've seen more deer not hunting, just walking through the woods, just at a normal rate of speed and being and talking, you know, the deer aren't afraid of you because you're not a predator. And I believe exactly, and I believe that a Bigfoot can actually pick up on this. They can sense it just as well as they might tell deer.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very interesting story. An acquaintance of mine was deer hunting. He was in a fallen tree, a freshly fallen tree, up in the branches, and he was completely hidden. And he was watching a deer come out into the pipeline. This is laid out into one of these natural pipelines, or non-natural pipeline, but natural gas pipeline.
Okay.
And it come close, you know, it was coming towards him, and he squinted his eyes. He had his eyes almost closed as he watched this deer. And that deer could not feel him looking at her. And she came right up on him. And as soon as he opened his eyes, her tail went up, she started looking around, but she didn't know where he was. He was upwind of her, so she couldn't smell him. But she felt that she was being watched.
I'll be darned.
And he come busting out of that thing, and he said she literally fell over. It stunned her so bad. She fell over, and then she scrambled to her feet and took off. It's like she was just running in place for a second, and then she just took off. He thought it was the most funniest thing. And I thought it was just horrible. How dare you do that? That's just mean, you know. But it was very interesting because you hear that all the time, that animals can sense that they're being watched.
Uh-huh.
And so he used this method of just slitting his eyes and just barely had his eyes open but was watching her. And it seemed to work. So maybe you might think about doing that
as well. Because, I mean, exactly. You know, so many witnesses say, you know, all of a sudden I feel like someone's watching me.
Right. Right.
So,
You know, or they say, well, they're here. Well, how do you know they're here? Because you can feel like you. It's not really that you're sensing them, which it could be part of that. But another thing is you have that feeling you are being watched.
Uh-huh.
And so they can easily creep up on you on their belly, very quietly, get there, and watch you through slitted eyes. And then when they get ready to open their eyes, well, all of a sudden now you're on to them.
Sure.
But I'm saying that the possibility of doing the reverse is also possible. That we are capable of doing the same slitted eye thing also. So, just wondering what they would think if we went up there to them and just slid it.
Well,
goodness.
I was a hunter for a very long time. Hunted a lot of deer and a lot of different animals before, and I made sure if I was hunting and I seen a deer, I never made direct contact with my eyes, never.
Really?
I would use my peripheral vision and watch their movement until they came into range. But a lot of times, if I would make direct eye contact with them, I was caught. I was busted. And they would take off and run away.
Now, would that be in close proximity, or I imagine that there would be some kind of a range to that?
Yeah, probably within 20 yards.
Okay,
within 20 yards.
Some of these hunters, they've got these scopes that go 1,000 yards, and they'll see a herd of antelope out there that's totally oblivious to them. So I imagine there's probably some kind of a range to that.
Yeah, well, I was a bow hunter, and so that would be within very close range, but. No,
I'm trying to remember that one report that the man was up in the tree. Was it you that told me this report, Luke, or someone else? There was a man up in a tree bow hunting, and he saw a Sasquatch run out into the river and kill a pig. And he was kill a pig, a hog, and it killed a hog. And it was a female, and she turned around, and she was scanning the riverbank because she could feel somebody looking at her. And she found him up in the tree because she could feel him looking at her. She grabbed the hog up and took off running. And I believe this is how the report went.
Yeah, I think that.
But that just, and I don't know what the distance was or anything like that. But it was interesting that she was able to locate him because she could feel him looking at her. Well, we are going to go to an intermission. I want everyone to go and get you something to drink and go to the restroom, and we'll be back. We have a special caller calling in that wants to have us play a sound for Scott and see what Scott thinks of it.
Great, that would be great.
Yeah, and Scott, you're doing great. I hope we're not barraging you too much with too many questions.
No,
okay.
I'm enjoying it.
Okay, well, everyone, relax, and we'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes. All right, bye-bye. Back in a minute.
Okay.
Miss Lauren.
Hello,
Miss Lauren. Okay, everyone, welcome back to Night Callers. I just had to ask Miss Lauren about that song.
What about it?
That's not your usual choice of music.
You said switch it up. You said classic rock, we need something else, and
well, okay. That was something else.
You got everybody on their toes, okay?
Okay, yeah, boy. Woo. Well, thank you for choosing that intermission music. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay, we are back with our guest, R. Scott Nelson, and we've got a ton of callers. I think a good deal of them are just listening in, But we're going to go ahead and take callers. You know, we were going to,
Sure.
you know, decide on whether to do that or not, and I think we're going to go ahead. Let's start with this first caller here. I believe this is Mr. Pat Rance. Do you know of Pat Rance?
Not offhand, no.
Okay. Okay. Well, he is a researcher out of Florida,
Okay.
and he will explain where this recording came from and everything else. But let's bring him on and introduce you to Pat Rance. All right, one moment.
Great.
Scott, this is Pat Rance. How are you?
Hi, Pat. Very good.
I'm a friend of Steve Summers.
Okay.
I sent you an email the other day with this particular audio recording attached to it, but I suppose you've been busy this weekend and all, but it's a pretty interesting recording a friend of mine got out of Alabama.
Okay.
Private property up there where I research, and I go up there about every 6 to 8 weeks. Had quite a bit of activity up there, but this particular audio recording last summer, he was coon hunting last summer with a couple of his friends, and at nighttime. They gathered up all the dogs and were going to head back home, but they had lost one dog. One dog did not return. And so they took all the other dogs back down the mountain, took them home, put them in their pens, went back up to the top of the mountain on this property, and were calling for the dog and using a small pistol grip parabolic dish to listen, to see if they could listen for the dog barking every time that they called them, so at least they could determine which direction it would be in, you know, so they could go find them. And while they were going, you know, trying to locate this dog, listening with the parabolic dish, my friend heard what he thought was a growling sound. So the little parabolic dish has a little record function. It'll record, I think, about 30 seconds. You know, not very much memory in it. But so when he heard this growling sound through his ears, it was close enough he could hear it through his ears. He hit the record button and recorded this short little clip. And if Luke or Lauren or Lori could play it now on the air,
Yes.
I'd like to see if you could give us your opinion on it.
Okay.
Let me find it. There we go.
You lose it already.
Yep.
I'm going to go ahead and play it one more time.
Sure. Well, I can tell you that that's certainly one individual. It's the same. Dare I go out on a limb and say it's the same species of creature that we have on the Barry Moorhead tapes, making the same. I can tell you this that making many of the same phonetic structures that we have isolated on our tapes. Absolutely. And you can tell that is all the frequency of that vocalization is way below what a human is capable of.
I would agree.
But you have, there are numerous places on the Barry Moorhead tapes that would parallel that very closely. But that is something that I would like to get my hands on and put it on a transcription program where I can speed it up and slow it down and vary the pitch and then intonation, stuff like this, and recover those phonemes.
I think it's in your email.
Get it down on paper. It may be. It may be. Did it come with Steve Summers' name on it?
No.
No, it came with my name on it, but I did copy it to Steve Summers and to Sally, I believe.
Okay. How long ago did you send it to me?
Thursday or Friday, just a couple days ago.
You may want to send that to me. And what? Yep.
That's your rugby email?
R Rugby. 2 R's.
Yes.
Okay.
We're both copied on a lot of emails, and so that's why I snagged your email out of that. On some
Go ahead, because I haven't heard that. That is a very if I've got it, I'm sure I would have run onto it in my email, but that's one of the best I've heard. I can tell you that.
Wow.
I've heard, little mumblings and things like that, and little whistles and clicks and things like that that wouldn't really, fit the category of language. But that one certainly does have. That's not just a growl, in other words. That's not just a grumbling or a gibberish. He is articulating phonemes there that have meaning.
Mm-hmm. When I first heard it last summer, I thought for certain it was, speech.
Absolutely it is. Yep.
Language.
And this is what we have to start doing, and this is going to be one of the real big important pushes of our book, is that we need to start collecting all these things in a national database, have them analyzed so that we can begin making the point to the general public out there that first off, the fact that we've intercepted their language, to me, proves their existence.
Yeah, I would say so.
It's like to me, it would be the same thing if SETI, or the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, right, had intercepted a communication from outer space between 2 different units, speaking in a vocal communication, and having all of the elements of language that these tapes do. Heck, we'd be stumbling all over each other, trying to proclaim the existence,
right.
to proclaim the existence of alien life. Yet here we have this, and to me, what better proof can you have other than a corpse?
Yes. Which
for the
we don't want to do that unless it's found that way.
Right, for the existence of any creature other than to have discovered his language.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott, what part of the country are you in?
Pat, thank you for that. That is a I will spend some time on that, and I will certainly, make that part of some kind of a database when we get it put together.
What do you think about this, Scott? That the the Barry Moorhead tapes were in the Sierras, and this was recorded in Alabama?
Well, again, I can't say that it's the same language, and I can't say that it's a different language. What I can say is that they are that I recognized distinct phonemes. Okay, or combinations of sound put together in such a way that they parallel those of the Moorhead tapes, the Barry Moorhead tapes. So to me, it's just common sense that this is a species, whether you want to call it human or animal or whatever. I've tried very hard not to get into those debates. But whatever it is, it's intelligent, and if we apply the same definition of humanity to these creatures as we do to ourselves. Language is what we use to describe ourselves as sentient thinking beings.
Yes.
That's what separates us from the animals.
What do you mean by that? Sentient. What do you mean by that? That's one of those words.
Sentient means thinking beings, self-aware.
Okay.
We are the only, supposedly, I mean, this is maybe a homocentric, outdated idea, but it's certainly, this has been the way we have defined ourselves as human beings. In fact, it's in our name. Homo sapien means the thinking man, right? So, which separates us from all of the other, creatures on the earth. Well, this creature is obviously intelligent, thinking. He has language, and therefore, if we apply the same standards of defining him as a creature, we have to also call him a sentient creature, a thinking creature.
Exactly. Which we all know he does.
Yeah.
We just don't have any way to prove it. But this language says, the analysis of his language says he is a thinking creature.
Without a doubt.
That is proof.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you take proof any way you can get it, and I accept that. You know, gladly.
Well, there's
Go ahead.
There's a lot of things that researchers find in the field that tells them that they are actually thinking creatures and that they have a thought process.
Sure.
I've been in
plan for the future.
Yes, they can think ahead.
Yes,
think
they think
ahead.
yes.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've been in areas where they have been a mere under 50 yards from me, and they have timed. And this was by a public road. Okay, this was at night, and they have actually timed a car driving by. When this car passes by, we have stepped back into the tree line, and it breaks cover and runs across the road. It actually had a thought process of what it was going to do in order for it not to be seen. Because we stepped out of the lights of the vehicle when it was coming down the road.
Unlike other animals that run out and run in circles and run alongside the vehicle, and you never know whether they're going to run out in front of you or run back into the woods.
Right, but this was a well thought out process of just getting across the road without being seen. We heard it cross the road. We heard the footfalls, and with each footfall, you could hear that kind of sound.
Sure.
So it was just, to me, it was a neat thing to experience that, and plus you're talking about stick structures. Researchers are finding sticks that are being placed on the ground in certain shapes. You'll have, let's say, an E shape of these branches that are laid out on the ground, but where the small stem coming off of the capital letter E is, there will be an X placed there, or there will be an A shape.
Yes, that's almost runic.
That's exactly what's being found now.
On one of Ron's trips up there, they came back from a camp, and see, they were giving the creatures food at night. They were leaving their leftovers out at night, and they'd wake up in the morning, and they would be, the pans would be cleaned up. And and of course they knew it wasn't bears and that. And one of his crew actually had seen one late at night, so they knew it wasn't bears. And so when they'd come back from their hunting expedition throughout the hills there, they started finding little tokens left for them. One day they came back, the creatures, obviously, who are so observant, had been watching them build their fire every night using pine cones. So Ron and Bill McDowell came back one day, and there was a little pile of pine cones piled up right next to the fire pit.
Wow!
And of course, they would have had to have known. It would have had to have been in the daytime, right? And then of course they knew where the hunters were. They were gone, and they weren't going to be coming back. And then one day they came back, and they found one of their logs. Okay, there was a log there that they usually sat on near the fire, and leaned up against this log, side by side, were a series of sticks of various shapes, almost as if they were laid there as a graphic form of expression, almost like a writing, in other words, or a runic, a runic.
That's very interesting. And I've talked to several witnesses and that have seen these branches that have been leaned up against, let's say, tree branches, 4 feet off the ground. There'll be a row of branches just leaning there, and they come from different types and different species of tree. You can tell they weren't deadfall, different shapes.
Sure.
And to me, it's fascinating to know that they're not only communicating through sticks and rock structures also. I've found several rock structures. I know a lot of people say, well, hikers will stack these rocks, but in a lot of the areas that I go, yes, even in the state of Texas, it's uninhabited and people do not go there. And you find these rock stacks and these stick structures that are there, and they're using to communicate. And what they mean, I don't know. Several tree breaks, what I found, are being broke over next to the trails, but what happens is they are all broke over in one direction, and that would be facing the southwest. Each and every one is broken over facing the southwest. What that means, I have no idea.
Well, it's easy for us to say, well, that's a territorial marker, like any animal would leave. But we're assuming. Some of them simply seem to be too complicated for them to be nothing more than a territorial marker. Right.
And I agree.
You're talking about like using human perception to try to figure things out. And we do have some questions from the chat. I'd like to bring them up.
Hey, thanks a lot, Pat. I'm excited to look into that.
Okay, well, check your email. If you don't have it,
I will. I'll get a hold of it.
Just in case.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks, Scott.
All right, man.
Well, you can hang on, Pat, if you want to. It's no big deal if you want to listen in or have any more interjections.
Well, I'm gonna sign off and just listen.
Okay.
I got to turn the air conditioner back on. It's really hot here.
Okay.
It makes a lot of noise.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks for calling, Pat.
Bye.
One of the questions from the chat is from the AARS show, which is Robert Morgan's show. They say, have you ever heard the expedition recording, which is one of mine, and I can answer that. No, he has never heard that. Okay, so he has no thoughts on it. The next one is East Texas Squatch Hunter, and he asked, Scott, if John Morley played the recording from the Nature's River Bottom for you.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe I have heard that. Now, he's played, I believe I've heard two of them from John Morley. One of them was to me, it was human beings speaking. One of them sounded like two human beings speaking back and forth. And I remember John Morley was at my house at the time when he played this particular piece recording for me, and he was surprised by that because he told me that the people that recorded that swore that there was no one there at the time, that those could have been during the time when those were recorded, and those could not be human voices. But to me, and the only other explanation that I would have is that the creature is mimicking humans, very precisely. Because, but on the one recording that he played for me while he was up here at my house, we were collaborating on a project of his, and the one he played for me up here sounded just like two humans speaking back and forth for a very short. It was a very short passage.
Okay.
So nothing there that I could connect to the other creature vocalizations that I've listened to.
Okay. Andy Drew. His question is: has Scott discovered anything that he might think might have sounded threatening, like keep out, stay away from my stuff, or such like that? You have.
Yes, all of the intimidation. In fact, that's one of the what in linguistics is called a function of language. Intimidation is one of the functions of all human language, and it's all over in this in the Barry Moorhead tapes. Now, a lot of the intimidation vocalizations are very low-pitched, forceful, not really even a growl, but almost a grumbling. It almost sounds, which seems to build up to a crescendo at the end of the vocalization with what I have termed a hehu, a terminal exclamation, almost like putting a period, an exclamation mark on the end of what you're saying. Okay, and I could try to mimic a little bit of that. It sounds like.
Yeah. Oh, well, you do that really good. That's great.
Well, in the military, we're trained to. That's how they pick us. That's how they pick us linguists. They test us for our abilities to mimic sounds and to pick up sounds that other people don't pick up. We're given a special test in order to before they spend the money to train us.
Exactly.
So
wow.
They pick people who have a kind of an innate ability for doing that. But read the question for me again, just to make sure I've covered
the question is have you discovered anything that you might that you thought might have sounded like threatening language,
absolutely.
like keep out, stay away from my stuff or such?
Now, nothing in there is a lot of cognatic phrases and words in these on these tapes. Cognatic meaning they sound like English.
Okay.
Okay. Now that's too much for some people to handle right there. All right, but none of the cognatic expressions that I've come across are threatening in any way, and they don't seem to. Most of the cognatic expressions are not intended for the humans to understand, but for the other creatures to understand. They seem to be bandying back and forth. And when we come across this intimidation technique of theirs, which I call hostility affirmations or hostility assertions, right? They seem to be speaking in some sort of a language, but it's not English, so it's got to be part of their own language.
Right.
And they are forcing it out at a very, very forcefully and with a very strong, emphatic termination to their exclamation, to their utterance.
Have you ever experienced that? Since we're speaking about more aggressive sounds, have you ever experienced? Well, we call them a huff sound. It is like a very sharp dispersal of air, a very gruff sound. It's a scene. There's. That is
certainly on the tapes. I personally have never experienced that out in the field.
Okay, yeah,
but it is.
I have.
In fact,
I've
transcribed. I think that might be what I have transcribed as and spelled it as in the transcription. Because we have to transcribe this in a phonetic language, which I've devised, right? And so it's not really in English, but I can kind of spell it in English.
Right.
And that would be like a KHU or a KHU with a glottal stop.
That's exactly right. That's exactly it.
They seem to use that again a lot as a terminal expression after to put a emphasis on what they've said.
Well, this
Gentlemen, I hate to interrupt, but we do have a caller.
Sure. Okay.
And I'm just going to contact them real quick and see if they, caller 828, I'm fixing to put you on the air. I don't know if you are just calling in to listen or if you have a question. So when I bring you on, just say just listening and I will put you back on mute. Otherwise, speak up.
Hi, it's JB.
Hi, JB. How are you doing?
Doing great. Enjoying tonight. Scott,
yes, sir.
You're doing your usual great job. I recall listening or hearing you say once before that what you're doing is not science. And I would have to agree with that. Science has to do with analyzing the sounds and what has been that has been mentioned before, that you mentioned earlier. What you're doing, I think, is an extension. It's an adjunct, and I think in many ways it's far more important than simply analyzing the sound and saying, "Yep, that's not a mutant raccoon" or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would certainly agree with what you said there. I have a commercial version of the Sierra sounds. And of course, you have the whole package, and
yes.
I am not capable of analysis the way that you are. But there is one interchange on there between what sounds to be a female and possibly the old man.
Yes.
Now, I hear that around here all the time, and I understood that completely. I hear it whenever I forget to take out the garbage or when I run the vacuum cleaner all wrong or something like that.
Oh, no, you didn't.
I understand what she's saying. And
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're talking, I know what interchange JD's talking about, and that is where there's certainly a female saying, and the vocalization sounds like vocal, and then right almost immediately following that, and it's almost a ritualistic interchange.
It is around here.
Oh yeah. and the male goes wackle, wackle.
Yeah.
You know,
almost sounds like Charlie Brown's teacher. Womp, 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 womp.
And I don't even get that in quite often. You have isolated certain phrases. I've heard you you express them before, and if there would be some way that people could go in. First of all, I probably give these beings. In fact, I'm not comfortable calling them creatures. I call them beings. More of an advanced status than a lot of people. But and I'm really no longer interested in science giving them official recognition. But if we could
like, what's the point? We believe, right, JB?
Yeah. And but you want to learn.
Sure.
We definitely want to learn more about them. If we could just isolate some of these phrases that possibly could be determined. You mentioned earlier that you've used some of these in the field that are not aggressive or threatening to them at all.
No.
To say, for example, could I leave you some shampoo, or what do you think of peanut butter, or something like that, might be a first step towards communication. Something not as ridiculous as what I said, but
sure.
Something that I mentioned to you once before in an email that if these beings are as ancient as we think they are, and there's a lot of assumption going on here, and they have interacted with the Native Americans, I cannot get over the question of whether or not these beings could have contributed to Native American language to some degree.
That's very interesting, because I've heard time and time again, has Native American language contributed to the language of the Sasquatch? But this is the first time I've heard the other way around, and certainly it is the nature of language to be traded back and forth between all of the practitioners by contact. So that if there was contact between, tribal Sasquatch and tribal human beings, certainly they would trade words back and forth. And that's an interesting thing to contemplate, which I have yet to do.
Well, a lot of it would, of course, depend upon who came first. In my mind, that's not a problem. Before I go, I want to thank you not only for what you're doing now, but for what you did for the country. As I've discussed with you before, your people, I'll say this and let it go. Your people gave us more than just about anybody else, and I really appreciate what you do and what you did and what they're doing now.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And you have a good evening, and I am enjoying this. Thank you.
Thanks, JB.
Well, we enjoyed you calling in, JB. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we do have one more caller, and I'm just going to ask him real quick if he has any questions.
Okay.
Hold on just a minute. 865, do you have any questions, or are you just listening in?
Sorry, I'm just listening in. I had the speakerphone on mute.
Okay. Well, we'll just put you back on mute then. All right. Let me see if I can get him back on mute. Okay, we do have one other caller, and then we're going to go to Footers in the Field right after this. So let me go ahead and bring this other caller on. I believe it's Henry Mays.
I believe you're right, Miss Laurie. How are you?
How are you? I'm so sorry, Henry. We had so many questions and so many callers, and I didn't mean to leave you on hold so long.
Oh, that's okay. No problem. I had the pleasure of meeting Scott last month at the Yakima Bigfoot Roundup. And also
is that right? Who is this again?
Henry May.
Okay.
Yeah. And his presentation was, of course, terrific. Great. I loved it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Scott if you were familiar with David Paulides' new book, Tribal Bigfoot, the fact that he has talked to several Native American elders who have said that that they've learned that if you talk to a Bigfoot in the Native American language, that they can actually understand it.
That I would not doubt that. I have heard that there's a new book out. I don't have it yet. But I would have to, again, say that would have to be regional. I mean, if you were, I think you couldn't just pick a Sioux language or a Lakota and take it into the Sierra Nevadas, and unless, who knows? If they're this, observant, but they would have to know an awful lot of languages.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
because the Native American languages were quite different regionally.
And he's actually interviewed several people for his book, Tribal Bigfoot, who have said that they've heard what sounds like a language coming out of the woods. It sounds like something speaking in a type of language.
Oh, sure.
So.
Oh, I don't doubt that. I've read dozens of reports that say the same thing. Absolutely.
Anyway, I wanted to tell everybody that tonight on HBM's Crypto Corner, I will have Diane Stocking as the guest.
All right.
Yeah, that's Donna's sister, so that should be a really great show.
I know. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll pop over there and listen in.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Henry.
She's going to be the guest tonight.
Do you have any other questions or anything?
No, that's pretty much it. I know that Scott's report is on David's website, Dave Paulides' website, NABigfootSearch.com.
Oh, it is. Good. That's good.
Yes, it is. We've been putting those URLs up, or we're supposed to be putting those URLs up where this report can be found. So, I don't know if we have or not. But our link girl is supposed to be on that. I hope she is. Henry, we thank you for calling in.
Sure,
no problem. We are going to take a short break, do Lauren's Footers in the Field segment, and then we'll be back. Just to let everyone check it out, go to the bathroom, do whatever you got to do. We'll be back shortly.
And now for some news you can use. This edition of Footers in the Field is called When Bigfoot Attacks, Astonishing Tales of Threats, Assaults, and Abductions.
Remember once again that these articles and reports have not been investigated by the Night Callers team, and their validity can be in question. But I found this article, and I thought it was pretty interesting, and it should serve as a great conversation starter for those of you out there in the chat, or just an interesting batch of stories for those of you listening at home. Anyways, it's up to you guys, and let me know what you think. The existence of Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, or many of the other names assigned to this unknown primate, is not yet a proven fact, simply because one has not yet been captured, dead or alive. There is, however, a lot of great circumstantial evidence in the form of hundreds of eyewitness accounts, footprints, hair samples, and less convincing, a few fuzzy or contested photos. But we still love our blob squatches no matter how fuzzy or blurry they are. You may have read or heard about many of the sightings of the elusive hairy biped, but less known are the close encounters of the third kind, contact, or even the fourth kind, abduction, with Sasquatch. Yes, people have reportedly been physically attacked by Bigfoot, and even abducted by the creature. But why are these stories less known? Probably because they are so fantastic and outrageous that most of these accounts are not taken very seriously. Even to those who think Sasquatch exists, like ourselves, look upon these cases with a highly skeptical eye. That's not to say they are not true, only that they have very little or no evidence to back them up. That said, here are some first-hand accounts of when Bigfoot attacks. 1902, Chesterfield, Idaho. A group of people enjoying a winter's day skating were suddenly terrorized by a hairy monster brandishing a wooden club. The witnesses said the creature stood about 8 feet tall. Later, 4-toed footprints were found that measured 22 inches long and 7 inches wide. Bigfoot indeed. No one was injured in the attack. 1912, New South Wales, Australia. A surveyor named Charles Harper was camping with several colleagues on the Curragh Mountain. One evening, as the men sat around their campfire, they became increasingly unnerved by the strange sounds that they heard coming from the woods. To help allay their fears, they piled more wood on their fire. The increased light revealed that something unexpected had invaded their camp. A huge man-like animal stood erect, not 20 yards from the fire, growling, Harper later told a newspaper, and thumping his breast with a huge hand-like paws. Harper estimated that the creature stood about 5'8" to 5'10", and was covered with long brownish-red hair, which shook with every quivering movement of his body. To say the least, the men were terrified. One even fainted. For several minutes the creature continued to growl and make threatening gestures at the men, then turned and disappeared into the dark forest. 1924, Ape Canyon, Mount St. Helens, Washington. Fred Beck and several other prospectors were puzzled by very large footprints they found in the canyon. That is, until they encountered the beast that had made them. They saw a large ape-like creature peering from behind a tree, watching them. One of the miners leveled his rifle at the creature, shot and possibly grazed it in the head. It ran off out of sight. Later, another creature was seen by Beck. As it stood on the edge of a canyon wall, Beck shot it in the back. It fell irretrievably into the canyon. These acts of violence by the humans was not to go unavenged by the Sasquatch. That night, the miners' cabin was attacked by at least 2 of the primates. For 5 hours, they pounded on the door and the walls and hurled rocks onto the roof in an attempt to break in. Fortunately, the windowless cabin was built to withstand harsh winters, and it kept the Sasquatch from entering. As dawn approached, the creatures abandoned their assault. When the miners finally ventured outside, they found numerous Bigfoot prints all around the cabin and a strip of wood gouged out from between 2 logs. There is some evidence that this attack may have been a hoax, while others contend that it is true. You decide for yourself. In 1924, in Vancouver, British Columbia, Albert Ostman is one of the few people who claims to have been abducted by a Sasquatch. It happened while he was searching for a lost gold mine that he heard existed somewhere near Toba Inlet. He had heard from an Indian guide about the legendary Sasquatch, but didn't take them seriously until he discovered that something was stealing food from his campsite at night. Then one night he was awakened by something picking him up in his sleeping bag. I was half asleep at first and did not remember where I was, Ostman said. My first thought was, must be a snowslide. Then it felt like I was tossed on a horseback, but I could feel whoever it was walking. After hours of being carried, Ostman was finally dropped to the ground, where he heard a strange-sounding chatter. It wasn't until dawn, however, that Ostman made his way out of his sleeping bag. He was astonished to find himself in the company of 4 Sasquatch, what appeared to Ostman to be a family. adult male and female, a young male and female. Osterman was able to provide detailed descriptions of the creatures, all of which, except for the young female, were enormous. Osterman claimed to have spent 6 days in the company of the Sasquatch family when he decided he had had enough, and he fired his rifle into the air and made a run for it. 1928, Vancouver, British Columbia. Again. A trapper named Mukalot Harry also claimed to have been kidnapped by a Bigfoot. The powerfully built Indian of the Nootka tribe was plying his trade in one of his favorite hunting grounds around the Kanuma River that autumn. Like Osterman, Harry was picked up in his sleep, bedding and all, and carried for about 3 miles by a large Sasquatch. When set down, he found himself surrounded by about 20 of the creatures, both male and female. When he at first planned to eat them, as their campsite was littered with large bones, the creatures poked and prodded Harry, seemingly puzzled by his clothing. After a while, they appeared to grow tired of the human curiosity, and many left the camp. Seeing his chance, Harry made a run for it, running right past his own camp to his canoe on the river. He never went trapping in the woods again. 1957, in China. On a May afternoon in the sparsely populated Chinese province, Zhu Fudi heard her young daughter screaming. The girl had been tending the family's cattle, and Zhu Fudi hurried to see what had happened. She was startled to see her daughter struggling futilely in the powerful arms of a young Yeti, the Asian version of a Bigfoot. Zhu Fudi rushed at the Yeti with a piece of wood and began to beat the creature. It tried to escape through a paddy field, but was slowed by the thick mud. More women from the village joined Zhu Fudi in beating the creature to death. So terrified were they of this strange creature that they cut its carcass into pieces. Eerie cries of mourning were heard from the hills the next day. 1977, Wantage, New Jersey. New Jersey isn't the first place one thinks of when Sasquatch is mentioned, but this reported attack comes from a rural area of that state in the month of May. The Seitz family was disturbed by something that had broken into their barn and crushed several of their rabbits to death. The predator returned that night, and the Seitz saw it clearly standing in their well-lit yard. It was big and hairy, Mrs. Seitz reported. It was brown. It looked like a human with a beard and mustache. It had no neck. It looked like its head was just sitting on its shoulders. It had big, red, glowing eyes. When the Seitz dog attacked it, the creature effortlessly swatted it away, sending it flying about 20 feet. On subsequent nights, the creature was seen several more times by the Seitz. So there you have them, only a few of the more well-known cases of close encounters with Sasquatch. Are they true stories, or just tall tales? You decide. Let us know. I found these at about.com in the paranormal section. You should go have a look. They have plenty of other Bigfoot articles, and this was the most interesting and realistic that I could find. The rest are interesting, but they seem more like tall tales to me. Y'all go see for yourself. And remember, if y'all have anything Bigfoot newsworthy happen to you during the week or weekend, you can now send it in to us, and we will share your big news on the air with all of our listeners. Anything at all, something that you may have seen in the media or an article like this, or something that happened to you recently in the field. We want to hear about it and share it in order to keep our Bigfoot community up to date. Remember, we will not disclose the name of the area if you do not wish us to. Also, these reports have not been investigated, so their validity can be in question. It is up to the person submitting the reports to be honest, as their name will be included in the report. To get your report on the air, please email us at nightcallers@live.com. And for more info, check out www.webjam.com/nightcallers. That's NITECALLERS. We will be taking your emails and messages before 5 p.m. on Sunday evening, and we will get it on the air that night. We hope to hear from y'all. This concludes your weekly dose of Footers in the Field. Have a great night.
Well, thank you, Lauren. I am getting some feedback on my telephone. Is that in the air, or is it just on my phone?
I'm getting it, too.
Can you hear it, anyone, or is it just me?
I can hear it. I can hear it.
Okay.
Oh, that's better.
Yes. I don't know what that was. That was awful. It just felt... But, Lauren, I tell you what, you're our little skeptic, but that's okay. We are back with our guest, R. Scott Nelson, the crypto linguist, and Luke, I know you probably have more questions.
Yeah, I do. I have several questions. I know what we're talking about, and people, I believe Henry May had brought it up, that people they've heard sounds coming out of the forest that sound like it is language, and I suggested maybe it was a geographical thing. You know, maybe their language is just geographical, and you mentioned that, well, maybe it would depend geographically if they were speaking a Native American language.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be more. What would lead you to believe that it would be? Well, yeah, you'd have a tendency to think that it would be geographic. This tribe speaks this language here, and then in the Pacific Northwest they might speak another language. So I guess it would just vary from one place to another.
Sure.
And so I can see where you're going with that. But
there's something in common that every place from Texas to Alaska has in common, and that's the English language.
Right. And do you think that they can speak English? There's been a lot of reports.
I'm really not going out on a limb here because it's going to come out pretty quick anyway. That I believe that they certainly can understand most of what we say. And from the cognatic expressions that we have logged from these tapes, that they speak a form of it themselves, or they can speak it. But they do it in such a way that it's incomprehensible to us.
Right.
The prosody or the rate of utterance is so fast that we don't even understand it as a language.
Right. It just sounds like sound.
Let alone that they might be speaking some of our own words.
Well, I have a...
Go ahead, Lori. Go ahead, Lori.
Okay. I noticed that you put here on this shortened version of your report, you said ritual defined as a practice or pattern of behavior regularly performed in a set manner is another important functional language. And then you said there is a great body of evidence documented by witnesses as well as researchers of the practice of signal drumming by means of wood knocking or rock bashing. We know that this is a form of communication.
Sure.
I mean, as researchers, we can't prove that it is, but we know that when we hear it, we know it's a form of communication.
Right.
We've always believed that the wood knocking is locating each other. But then also, I had this happen to me. Every time I would go into the woods, when I would leave the neighborhood and actually enter into the woods, there was a wood knock. And every time I would come out of the woods, there was a wood knock.
Can I ask you something about that?
Yes.
Lori, was it a single wood knock?
Just a single wood knock.
And you were by yourself?
By myself.
Okay.
I know where you're going with this.
Okay.
Because it was one person going in and one person going out. I've heard that said.
Okay.
Also, but I think it's more she's coming in and she's going out. And, of course, you know, I gave them nightmares. I know I did because I was on their trail. I really was. But also, I'll tell you something else. I have heard drumming out in the woods where there should not be drumming. And we're talking, it sounds just like Native American drumming and chanting. I heard this down in South Texas. Now, I did not get in my car and go driving around to see if there was some powwow going on somewhere, but I took the word of the people that were there saying there was no such thing going on. But then I've also heard other witness reports saying they heard drumming and chanting coming from the woods. I've heard reports of just hearing chanting which, of course, it could be anything. It could be, me, I tend to want to say, was it any time during a pagan holiday? Or, especially coming out of Oklahoma, there's a lot of Native American powwows and Red Earth and all of that kind of thing. But the knocking, there's an interesting pattern to the knocking. If you go out and knock 2 times, you can get a 3-knock, or if you knock 3 times, you get a 2-knock response. Now, this doesn't always, this is the way it used to work. And it was like I could go out and knock 3 times with a few seconds in between, and I would get a 2-knock response. But then it never happens. So in other words, it's like, okay, we have to change our MO here. They have figured it out. And so now I'm fortunate if I get a return knock. It's almost as though in this part of the country where I live, they don't even do it anymore. I know they're here.
Do you still get the single knock when you enter the forest?
No. Of course, I don't live in that area anymore either.
Okay.
But at that particular time, I was, yes. And it was just, in fact, I had people go with me and say, look what's going to happen. We're going to walk into the woods. You're going to hear a wood knock. And I would stop and I'd just smile at them because we'd hear it. So there were witnesses to it. And so, but anyway,
now,
the
thing about wood knocks is it's got to be some form of communication. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
But the other thing is that that would not really fall under the category of language.
No, it's just another form of communication.
Right. Otherwise, you'd have to imagine that they were beating out some sort of a code in order for it to be a language.
Yes.
And
it's not like a Morse code or anything like that.
No.
Even though I've heard just tapping at night. Now, I don't know if a woodpecker would be tapping at night, but I have heard just tap, 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 tap. And don't know what it can possibly be. I wanted to also, this you had written, and it's fascinating. Did you write this piece here on this shortened version of your study? Did you write this?
Yes.
You did?
You talking about the characteristics of human language?
Yes.
Yes, that's mine.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. You say right here, does he think in linear patterns or more holistically? And when you said holistically, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's pretty widely believed now that that when man devised a phonetic means of expressing themselves graphically, in other words, the written language, when man quit expressing themselves through pictures or pictographs,
right?
That it changed the whole way our mind works. That, for instance, the Indians didn't have a phonetic alphabet when we came to this country, and many other primal peoples do not have a phonetic, graphic, way, or it didn't before the advent of white man showing up, or European man, did not have a phonetic way of expressing themselves graphically. Okay, they didn't have the written language, right? They expressed themselves through pictures, and they could take a picture, and it could maybe be a hunting scene, and that picture of a hunting scene would tell the whole story. They would look at that. For instance, you might draw a picture of a fire. Okay, the picture of the fire meant fire to that person looking at the picture, and it was enough to get the point across. Well, when we devised a phonetic alphabet, and this happened, thousands of years ago for Western culture, right?
Right.
It took us a step further away from the actual object or the fire itself. It takes us away, one step further away from the actual. Now, here again, we're getting into psycholinguistics, right? And I don't want to get,
right,
too far into that. But basically, by us relating the concept of fire to F-I-R-E, we see F-I-R-E on a paper, right?
We visualize it.
Right. It's changed. Suddenly, the way our minds work goes in a straightforward, in a straight motion, essentially. We think in a line or in a linear pattern from the beginning through the duration to the end. We think in one straight line is the way our minds work now, right? Or in a linear pattern. It's believed that primal man did not think in this way, that he saw things as a whole.
That's so interesting.
And it really speaks to really the big difference in the way that Western man's mind works and has worked for thousands of years, and how does a tribal man from South America, how does his mind work? Or even North American tribes when Europeans first came, right? They had not made that transition into a linear form of thinking. That's my point in that.
Yes. Okay, I have another question, and I know that you are not a physician or someone that knows about human anatomy or could even claim to know about Bigfoot anatomy, but
sure.
What I am concerned, not concerned, but curious about is their vocal cords. You listening to this language, would you say that would you guess that possibly their vocal cords are very similar to ours?
I think they have to be almost the same. Now they may have additional apparatus to ours. Okay.
Right.
But what I do have to say is that the articulated phonemes that we've recovered, we've isolated 39 of them, right?
Okay.
Definite, different phonemes. And they are so similar to our own that we have to assume that they are produced by the same apparatus that we have.
Okay.
That would be the tongue, the teeth, the lips, the entire tracheal tree, the oral cavity, and the nasal cavity. Has to be almost the same as ours.
So in other words, we would be able to. Okay.
Yes.
But we would be able to also, in turn, imitate them, but probably without the same. What's the word I'm trying to think of? Volume.
Yeah, the volume and the frequency. We probably wouldn't be able to hit the low. The low notes and the high notes, but we can
What makes them able to reach the high notes and the low notes if their vocal cords are?
In some ways, lung capacity alone. If they're that much bigger, it only follows that they would have to have larger lungs, much larger lungs. If their body weight or volume is 3 times bigger than ours, we can assume that their lungs are that much bigger.
Absolutely.
Which would allow for a higher range of voice, a higher vocal range. But we can actually come out and say, because the phonemes are so similar to our own, we have to believe that we are capable of learning their language and vice versa, and passing words back and forth. They would, by observation, be able to learn English words, Spanish words. And because language lives and dies like a living thing and evolves, right? Since English has been a primary language on this continent for at least 300 years, going on 400, and Spanish longer than that. These creatures.
But would you agree that language has to be used to stay alive? If
Sure.
you don't, if a language is not used, then it dies. It is forgotten.
Sure. Oh
okay.
yes, of course, sure.
All
and
right.
and that's coming to my next point is that's
okay.
why the American Indian languages have died, and
Uh-huh.
they've been replaced by English throughout the whole North American continent, right,
Mhm.
as well as most of Europe. So it would be a natural thing for Sasquatch, if they indeed, communicated with the American Indians for thousands of years, that as that language died, they began to assimilate the same language that the Indians assimilated. And that's our own. These things
it's interesting because
follow.
people are out there trying to interact with Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And they're trying different methods. They're trying to speak to them in Native American. They're trying to mimic what they've heard them do. They're trying to speak to them in English.
Mm-hmm.
And you have any advice on these people that are trying to communicate?
Yes.
Okay.
Use your own language. Speak in a natural tone of voice and speak to them sincerely. And now, whether that's successful or not, I don't know. It has been successful for me in the field, as has mimicry of what I believe to be their own language.
Right.
I got a response from that. But after all of this time, in going over and over and over these tapes, I have a sincere belief that they understand enough that they would almost appreciate it.
Yes. Out of respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like if I was to come up to you and I didn't know what language you spoke and I'm totally acting like a nut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, trying to talk to you like in sign language and everything else, and I can see what you're saying there.
Or like we think they're stupid.
Exactly.
Right?
Like there's some dumb ape, like, ooh, do you understand that?
Trying to talk to them in baby talk or in pidgin English. It's, right. You're absolutely right.
I can see that. That is fascinating. Luke, do you have anything to say, or you just, or I haven't heard a word out of you. Are you ready to clear your throat right about now, or Luke is our
can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
I had lost. I was not connected for quite a while.
Oh, no, you totally, well, it's kind of good you missed it. You're going to have to catch it in the archive.
That's okay. That's okay. I did catch what you were talking about just now, and as far as them, talking to them and not acting, stupid, making ape gestures and all this stuff. I mean, that to me that's kind of silly because that's not how they act. And no. I've done with my research. I've actually I haven't done a lot of what they call blasting or anything like that. I've used basically scent from species of vegetative food sources in the area. I'll take them and pick them during the prime months and freeze them, and when these food sources aren't available, I'll use them to attract them. Because I've always thought that I'm not going to get out there and try call blasting because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm saying. What is it saying?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
What message am I relaying to them? Mm-hmm. It's like I won't use fresh meat to bait them in because to me, fresh meat draws an aggressive behavior. And when fruits and vegetables that are indigenous to the area, you do not get this aggressive behavior. It's almost like it stimulates something in them, so I don't use meat to attract them. I'll use fish-flavored cat food. There you go, dry fish-flavored cat food. But,
no, he gave away his secret.
Oh, yeah.
Suffice it to say, from my point of view, suffice it to say that I believe, and here again, I don't want to come off like an old-time Bigfoot researcher, but
but you're fast becoming one.
I feel like that. Yeah. I believe that the next step in all of this research is going to be contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's
what I want to do. That's what I'm trying to do.
I don't believe it's going to be a skull or a corpse. Mm-hmm. I don't believe they will let us do that. I believe it's going to take contact the same way we would do with any undiscovered tribe.
Right.
Yes.
And
I don't think everybody's up to that. I think there's just certain individuals that, well, exactly, me either. I can't guarantee I'm not going to faint dead away once it talks back to me, Well, but
the thing about it is if contact, if contact is going to be made, it's going to have to be made over a long period of time, and a lot of researchers that are out there cannot afford the time to spend weeks and weeks in the field. The funding's not there. Now, some people are receiving funding, but a lot of people don't know exactly where to locate a group of these creatures.
But there are researchers out there that have live areas, but they also have to support themselves.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. And
weekend warriors.
Almost the best scenario is to live right in amongst them.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That is the best scenario because then you are always home at some point in time. Well, Scott, you have been an awesome guest.
Well, thank you very much.
We are so thankful that you came on to the show. I've learned so much, I've been very excited about you coming on. Because this is
thank you very much. I've enjoyed it a lot, Laurie.
And but I just wanted to say that you taught us all a lot, and we very much appreciate it. And we'd love to have you on again someday.
Well, we'll definitely do that.
Okay. Everyone, we are winding down, and at the end of the show, we have Larry Batson next week. So you all tune in, and tune in. And we will see you later. Thanks for listening to Night Callers Radio.
Great. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Night Callers. Good night, and God bless.